Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm joined by the King of Burbank, Michael Fairbanks, as we review Zach Cregger's Weapons. Set in a small Pennsylvania town, Weapons follows a community after 17 out of 18 students in a class end up disappearing one night. At 2:17 a.m., all the kids got up, left their house, and ran off into the darkness, never to be seen again. The community is obviously shocked and is grieving from this. They don't know why the kids did this. Who is to blame? Is it the teacher's fault? Is it due to a show? Is it due to some pact they all had? The kid left over in the class has no answers. The teacher has no answers, and the community is left to just dwell. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the podcast. I'm super excited to get into this today because we have a bit of a debate on our hands, but I think those make some of the best episodes. So without further ado, let's get to our review of Weapons. Okay, Michael, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about Weapons, Zach Cregger's new film, a film I feel like there was a lot of anticipation around. I know you were not a big fan of Barbarian. I'm sure we'll get into it at some point today. I, along with a lot of other people, were big fans of that film. And then also you just get like the lore of this film of Weapons just grows and grows. It's him processing the death of his friend, releasing on the anniversary of his death, which is pretty tragic. You have Jordan Peele firing his management team because he couldn't get the rights to this. A lot got built up for this film, and I'm very curious to get into our thoughts today. Did this live up to the hype? Michael, I'll turn it over to you first again. As the Barbarian hater, did Weapons do anything for you?
What's so interesting is that I do think this movie is way better than Barbarian, mostly because I just find the sensibility of it way more mature. Barbarian to me was just crass. I hated the twist in Barbarian. That's really why I didn't like it. It was well made and well acted, and quality wise, fine. I just thought his script was kind of rough. So going into this one, I had high hopes because I really liked the trailers, and it was definitely one of those cases where I was like, I think if this guy has a story that I like better, I'll like the movie better. And that turns out to be exactly what happened. I think that this movie is very rich. I love all the different characters. I've actually seen this twice because on first viewing I was unsure of what I thought about the jumping characters structure that's been compared to things like Magnolia, even though it's not that similar since it's in chapters. My first thought was that I think it belabored what could have been a great, like, 100-minute straightforward movie where they're just jumping between characters normally. And I was actually thinking, like, it's interesting that the one element of Barbarian that I thought really worked kind of brought this down. But on the second viewing, knowing where it was going, I appreciated much more how it kind of unfurled the information to the audience. I think it's one of those things where once you actually know what's going on, the sophistication of like how to write that and how to bring it all together just kind of stands out a lot more. So I would say I've sort of retracted that criticism or maybe dialed it back. I think maybe it could have been a straightforward movie and still been good, but that's I don't feel as strongly about that anymore. I do think that this is just really great, excellent performances by everybody. Um, Perhaps the standout, although we can't really get into it until the spoiler section, is Amy Madigan. But really everybody, and it's fascinating how the entire movie was virtually recast. Josh Brolin was supposed to be Pedro Pascal. Julia Garner was supposed to be Renata Rainsva from Worst Person in the World. Benedict Wong was supposed to be Brian Tyree Henry. And it's just fascinating to imagine that because all of the alignments with the cast and these characters just feel so perfect that it feels like that was his vision from the beginning, which is very impressive. And yeah, I think it's really slick, really kind of empathetic in a lot of ways, which is what I kind of was missing in Barbarian. I felt like this had a lot of care for its characters and what they're going through. Um, Along with being really morbid and creepy and funny. I think it's excellent. I This has been a great year for horror, and this is just yet another benchmark in that for me.
I'm gonna disagree with you. I know it's gonna shock everyone, right? Like, oh my god, Carson didn't like a film. Um, Very disappointing in my opinion, and we'll get to it. Let's start with the positives. I agree the cast is really strong here, especially those who got recast. Especially, I will say Brolin. I think is really really good here. I cannot imagine it being anyone else. Like I think that is perfect. I think this cast is really strong. The setup here, incredible. Like what an incredible setup. 2:17 a.m. All these kids go out. Um, it's a good setup. I think that this film, I will even say, like, I agree that I think the switching character structure, which is clearly him being like, people love this aspect of Barbarian. Let's go, let's turn it up to a 12. I will even say, like, maybe on a rewatch that will grow on me. I think for me, I really was frustrated by where this film went. And I know we're not in a spoiler section. Um, this to me feels kind of like in some ways like if you mix Long Legs and Antlers together. Granted, it's a way better film than Antlers. Let's be clear about my opinion. And just
It's
kind of made
crazy that
it.
you even remember Antlers.
How could you forget? What an iconic film. Speaking also of Amy Mardigan, she in it? She's the principal in it. Shout out. Some connections here. The whole time I was like, this is giving something, and I'm like, it's giving Antlers. It just feels like it's doing that, but then like for dummies. Like I really was so frustrated by how telegraphed this film is to the point when you get to the actual reveal. I kept thinking, because also Barbarian, and I'm not saying Zach Cregger needs to be known for big twists. He doesn't need to be a Shyamalan. I think that's actually probably harmful to like define your career by. But it's so obvious where it's going and it just draws it out so much. I was like, there has to be some twist. There has to be something that is going to catch me off guard. And no, not really. It's just kind of what you think it's going to be. To the point where there is, and we'll get there in spoiler sections, there is one specific choice of what they write in a car, which I'm like baffled by. Why would you ever put that on there if that's where we're going? Very, very confusing to me. But I was frustrated. I didn't think the characters really worked for me. I mean, I thought they were all very one-dimensional. Like, they're fine. It's just like most characters kind of get boiled down to, we're sad our kids are gone, which, like, yeah, fair. Like, that's a good emotion. I agree. I'd be sad too, but there's not a lot there. Even Barbarian had like certain societal reflections on like Detroit and white flight that I thought was quite worthy. Didn't really see any of that here, to be honest. I was just really disappointed by how simplistic this was. And I kept thinking, for how great of a setup it is and how like immediately your brain is just like, oh, this is a fuck situation. And it is a fuck situation. Obviously, these kids disappeared. It never felt like it went dark enough for me. It never was like Long Legs, where Long Legs, and I do have, issues with the film still. It broods this just like evilness where it's just wicked and it's evil and it's dark and you can just feel that in every frame and it's uncomfortable. This film never really did that. There's the one scene of the hair clipping in the car, which is like kind of getting there. But I wasn't a big fan of that. I will say I like I guess I'll save that thought for spoilers. But I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I guess to me, I think that horror kind of needs to go back to its roots of not always trying to aggressively have just like a societal message. I really like when they do that, but I think people expect it now. And I think it's okay to just have a story that's eerie and creepy that is just accessible. And I think that this movie does that really well because ultimately, yeah, the twist is pretty simple, and I would hesitate to even call it a twist so much as a resolution. But I do think that the flip side of what you're saying is that someone who is just watching it expecting like a scary movie actually gets that, and it's not some like esoteric thing that's trying to be about eight other things. Eddington fan talking about this is very funny. But like it just I kind of like that it's extremely meat and potatoes. And it also fits into a certain niche of horror, specifically like the type of monster, quote unquote, that we see, that I feel like has not gotten a lot of really great movies that I can think of. And I feel like this really folds into the canon of one of the best blank movies that I can think of. And I don't know. I think that's why you're seeing such a satisfied reaction from the general audiences, like not just critics. Like it feels like this movie is really resonating with just casual moviegoers. And usually that's certainly not the demographic that I'm thinking of the most. But I think this movie is artful in its execution, but it also is accessible. And that's what I would say to that is I maybe while watching it was expecting something a little bit wilder for all of the buildup, but the more that I reflect on it and think about it, I actually do think that it's very satisfying. And as far as like the comparison to Long Legs, I would agree that Longlegs has maybe a more palpable sense of dread, but I also find that Longlegs in the back half kind of peters a little. Like it sort of gives out, whereas Weapons really like spikes in the back half. And that's what I would say kind of differentiates them for me. I also don't really like Nicolas Cage's performance in Longlegs, and that kind of hurts it for me. But I just think 90% of the time Nicolas Cage is a clown, so that kind of hurt Longlegs for me. And I kept wishing that Longlegs was played by like a character actor and not a guy who is washed up trying to make a comeback. But that's another review.
Look, as someone who got a literal headache in the film, literally felt sick from his yelling, I'm not going to disagree with you. You could really say I don't like Nicolas Cage and then just end the sentence there, and I think you'd be valid for the last like 10, 15 years of his career. It's been rough. um, I, I will get into spoilers here in a minute because it is really hard to discuss this film without getting into spoilers. I will just say I think I disagree for me, and I agree with you also that everyone is liking this film. So good for everyone. I appreciate that, and I appreciate I'm in the minority here. I think for Longlegs, the third act, well, it definitely goes in some like directions, right, which maybe are a little bit silly, maybe a little bit weird, maybe a little bit forced. A different podcast. I agree. One day I'm sure we'll get into it. I at least appreciate that where they went there elicited like a response from me. It got a reaction. In that case, it's of dread, of just sadness, of seeing what has happened and what the situation is. Here, and I'm not saying this necessarily had to be the same level of like dread. I don't think Weapons needed to be that. I just felt so lacking that reaction. I was lacking any response to this. And I think the issue is, as you mentioned, it's not really treated like a twist. It's really treated just as a resolution. I think that is a mistake when you present such a compelling mystery, because this film opens up with a mystery. This prompt is a mystery. I think that is weak when you present something that is so good. And if it was like a weak mystery, okay, whatever, just a kid goes missing, great. But there's all these specific details in it, so strong. And then you just I don't know. Let's get into spoilers. I know we're still early into this and we can still jump around, but it's hard to discuss this without getting into spoilers. So if you've not seen Weapons, highly recommend you go see it and then come back and finish this. Chances are you're going to really enjoy it. But spoilers, it's a witch. Oh my God. A witch moved in with this family and now it's a witch. Did you see it coming from when they painted witch on the side of her car? And then the witch just can just do this because she's a witch, of course. So she has these magical powers and it just kind of just happens. There's no like conflict, there's no real struggle, there's no real anything. She just controls people. It's just what it is. So she can just do this. I found that to be very underwhelming. What do you mean? Like, what do you mean it's just a witch? She just can do this. It's not really, again, any struggle. There's no really compelling argument there. Okay. And I don't know. What did you think? I mean, it sounds like you were a fan of The Witch.
It's just that I wasn't really looking for and. It was. I see what you're saying about writing witch on the side of Julia Garner's car, but I do think that plays into certain themes of suburban paranoia being proven right in this case, because like these people want that like supernatural solution, but in the real world that wouldn't be the case. It would just be a witch hunt for this elementary school teacher, but like in actuality there is a witch. And like, yeah, it's simple, but I think that it kind of worked for me. And I definitely think a lot of that comes down to like I mentioned, Amy Madigan's performance. She's so eerie. She's so gross and just like corrosive. And I just thought she inhabited that role so well. And I also loved her costume and just the whole visual design of that character. Like anytime you see her in, especially like the really clownish costume, you there's just something about it that really clashes with the whole aesthetic that this is going for, the very kind of prisoners, hyper realistic suburban, like gray washed out aesthetic, that when you see this character who almost looks like Pennywise at times, it's jarring. And I feel like it really kind of compels you to be like, okay, like this is going to be way crazier than I expect from this kind of movie. And that's ultimately why it worked for me. And I also think it would be good to point out that I read a review with Zach Cregger where he said, or an interview with Zach Cregger, where he said that he started both Barbarian and this script by not knowing the ending. He just like posed the question of like, okay, a bunch of kids ran off into the dark and I don't know really what happened. And like by writing it, he sort of like discovered the answer as he was writing. And I just thought that was fascinating. And I think that does kind of play into maybe what you found disappointing, which is that you were hoping for like an extremely intentional ending that really kind of like makes a big point. And I just don't really know if that's exactly how he writes. But that's kind of just a stylistic preference. But this time I felt that it really worked.
Valid, I guess. I didn't see that interview. That makes sense as his writing process, and I can see why that would work more for me in Barbarian than here, specifically with the question he poses at the beginning. It's not even that I really want to make this an impact. It's just like I wanted something to like give me some emotion. Antlers, even, and Antlers is a terrible fucking movie. Like, let's be clear, Scott Cooper really didn't do well there. That at least like builds it up, and it really broods, and it really like feels like it's building to something, and then it delivers something bad. Again, don't like that movie at all. It just, for me, this was far too casual. Even her, which I agree, her performance is great, and I like how she visually presents herself. Even that is just so like, you see her way too early on, and they really take out like, don't show the shark. It's the most simple term in horror, and I think they don't do that enough with her. They don't protect her enough. I will say I liked the one bit I liked, and I also, I guess, jumping around, didn't love a lot of the comedy, I feel like, in this third act, because naturally you start to go, this is a stupid plot. What do you mean they never searched the house? They never interviewed these parents. And then you see that happen, and it's, in my opinion, played a little bit for comedy, which I thought was, again, kind of undercutting itself with what it's built up, especially because you have like a lot of tragedy here. You have Gardner's character, who is this alcoholic who is really suffering from this community and being isolated. I wish her character got more. You have this father, and a lot of parents, but specifically this father, who is grieving the loss of their child, who doesn't know what to do. There's grief in this child who is the last one in his classroom, and he claims he doesn't know where his students are, his friends are. Granted, that gets resolved and kind of explored later on. There's a lot of tragedy here, and it felt a little bit weird that we continually undercut it with comedy. I didn't hate when the kids all chased the witch and killed her graphically. I thought that landed in the same way that like the ending of Barbarian landed, where I was like, oh, that is the one piece of this in the conclusion that really worked for me and got just something from me. I was tremendously bored by the rest. And I think what's frustrating is we spend so much time jumping around these characters, jumping around their relationships, their failed relationships, some of their traumas. And it feels to me like the characters just become so one note in the conclusion here. I was really frustrated that it feels like we don't get much from them. We never get a deeper sense, where like even in Barbarian, granted, I think they're more kind of comedic even toys there, Justin Long specifically. But even when, like, you do get Justin Long throwing her off the roof, like, you get something where it goes back to that character. I didn't feel like that was particularly strong here either, which is frustrating because, again, they jump around these characters. You spend so much time, in my opinion, way too much time building up these characters in this situation, especially knowing where they're going. I was also a little bit frustrated by that, I'll be honest.
I think that that's one of my frustrations with it too, is that I feel like they all wind up in one place, and I wish that wasn't necessarily the case for how much time we spend with them separately. And I know that a lot of the time with these types of movies, that's usually the gimmick, is like, how did all these people get to the same, party at the end or whatever? But like, I definitely think that I wish there was more than either they get to the house and they're not weaponized, or they get to the house and they are and die. I definitely think that he could have been a bit more creative on that. But at the same time, the effect of the people being weaponized was so scary to me. And I thought everyone is Benedict Wong, which certainly the most effective horror sequence is when Benedict Wong comes out of nowhere, weaponized, and starts chasing Julia and Josh, and then gets run over. Like, that scene to me is masterful. And even just like the cutting of him like running across the town to show you just like how far he ran, like, I loved that. But even the ending, even though I have that quibble, it's hard for me to complain when you get such great beats like Josh Brolin throwing Austin Abrams house like 7 times. And all I could think about the whole time, and I know this is sort of unrelated, is that Zach Cregger's next movie is a Resident Evil adaptation. And the whole time I was just thinking about, like, God, that's gonna slap, because he has so many different little beats of like how these, I know they're not zombies, but like they're pseudo zombies, and the way they're acting and the way like the action is blocked and choreographed in that very kind of chaotic, borderline comedic, stressful way. I was just thinking, like, God, this sensibility is going to whip in Resident Evil, and I can't wait for that. But even just within the movie itself, I felt that it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It felt like it was very much going for something that could make the audience laugh and kind of have a cathartic experience together, because it felt very like the witch ultimately being chased and killed, especially. I feel like you just get the crowd so on board with like loving watching her just like scream and run and in terror as the kids chase her. Like, he really milks that, like, just her like flailing her arms around and like running, and just like the kids like bursting through the windows and through the other houses. And like, it's simple, but I think it works. Like, you can feel the electricity of everyone being like, yeah, fucking get her, like, it's so hard for me not to ultimately feel like it followed the fun.
Yeah.
I know I keep going back to that, but I really feel like that is huge. So I feel like Barbarian didn't do that. Barbarian was very ugly and very, basically, my complaint about Barbarian comes down to the fact that I just think that the way he kind of grotesquified victims of sexual assault and people who are inbred and XYZ, just, I thought it was really just rubbed me the wrong way. Especially like
Sure.
as a first feature, I'm just like, dude, like, it just felt like edgelord shit. So I think that like I think that was what was refreshing about this one, is I felt like he really wasn't trying to do any of that, and that really invigorated me to enjoy it, because I felt like he really kind of grew on this one. And sometimes that means that it's not perfect, but I
Yeah.
I still just had so much fun with it.
I agree that as a director, I still think he's very strong as a director here. All the chase scenes that you mentioned are all fantastic. The kids breaking down the door, just like this horde of fucking like demons, is fantastic. The Benedict Wong bit is great. Also, how great to see, and granted, I think horror has overall been pretty immune to this, but like another big feature that just looks good. I compared to so many bad films that just look horrible recently. The practical effects here are great. The gore is great. I mean, this is a really gross film at times. I kept thinking, like, I wonder if Paul saw this, because I don't think he could see some of this. I think the peeler to the face would be a lot. I think there's just some bits here that maybe would get him a little bit on edge. But no, I also think he, as a director, though, again, remains strong. I'm excited to see what he does with Resident Evil. I think for me, Barbarian, and it's a big conversation with the sexual assault. We'll save that for the Barbarian episode when we inevitably do it, because of course you want to talk about that so badly, I'm sure. Um, I think it does a better job at continually bringing the fun and making it fun, because they do have that extravagant third act where it's really quite campy and quite over the top fun, but you get little moments like Justin Long, like measuring the stairs and measuring the basement dungeon area, I guess let's call it. You get little moments like that throughout that continually, like, I think, refocus the audience to understand, like, oh, we're laughing at this film. When she is opening the door in the basement and it's this terror, it's very tense moment. It continually plays itself to where it's so over the top, where you are kind of forced, or at least my audience was forced, to like laugh and be like, "Oh my god, what are you doing? These characters are so dumb." But it's doing it in a way that I think is very controlled and very entertaining. I think Barbarian was better at being entertaining throughout the feature. Here, I think there's a lot of this movie that is not entertaining in that way. It's not comedic, it's not taking the piss out of itself, but then it wants to go there in the third act. And I think that's probably why I found it to be more jarring. I think if it had those elements throughout, you really went over the top with its comedy. I think it would have worked more once we got to that third act. For me, it felt like a shift from what we were building to. But I wouldn't blame anyone for having fun. I also had fun in the third act. It is obviously, there are fun bits there, and those still land for sure.
I do think that it kind of slopes up with the comedy, though. Like the Josh Brolin and Julia Garner segments are pretty deadly serious, but I do think that once we get to Alden Ehrenreich and Austin Abrams segments, it's pretty goofy. Like it starts with like this wild goose chase where he's like chasing him down and he knocks him over and he gets stabbed with the needle, and it's very kind of like, oh, bumbling corrupt cop. And then the Austin Abrams part is just pure comedy. It like looking for things to steal, he's jumping around, he's like exploring the house and pulling out the Willow DVD and being like, "Ooh, Willow!" Like he's a very kind of comedic character. So I do think it kind of I do think it slides into comedy, and that's something that I appreciated more in the second viewing is the order of the segments, because I don't think it kind of um, jumps around in a way to where like the tone is all over the place. I think it kind of eases into where it ultimately goes, and like by the time you get to the Benedict Wong segment where he gets cursed and the witch is there and she's like doing her thing, it feels to me like you've been waiting for that moment where like it goes from like funny to just crazy. And I just think that like that transition really kind of landed for me, because I felt like it prepared me for it.
See, I think you have to go. I think for me, it's hard for the film, and I agree with you. I think that's a good read on the film and its tone. I think it's hard for me. For me, it felt kind of weird comparison, like the MCU has felt for these last 5 years, where like you start with something quite serious. I'm quite invested in this woman and in Josh Brolin in these deadly serious scenes and these real emotions. Similar to how like I'm invested when I sit through Shang-Chi and you get to this ending. It's like, oh, where's this going next? And then it feels, I guess, let's kind of drop the MCU comparison because it's going to be too much explaining. But it's hard for me to go from drama, heartbreak, my child is missing, I am being ostracized by this entire community, to then like, oh lol, I'm a silly goofy guy who does drugs and breaks into houses and steals stuff for money. Here's some forks, can I get $100 for these forks? To me, that writing felt very The Monkey. And it's interesting to me why, I don't know why, I look at this film and I just see so much Oz Perkins, not even just Longlegs, but I see the monkey, I see the Black Coat's daughter, I see a Hansel and Gretel, or Gretel and Hansel, whatever that was called. I see so much Oz Perkins in the screenplay, and I really don't know why, and I don't think it's necessarily the best fit for Cregger. I guess it's probably better received than like any Oz Perkins film, so that's good for Cregger. I guess maybe he really nailed it. But I just keep coming back to this director's work, and I'm not really sure why.
I think the difference to me is Oz's movies are always focused on the same thread the entire time. So when like the monkey like stops to be like, and this is the glib funny part, to me it doesn't feel like I'm watching the same movie. Versus Weapons, I feel like it's the same town, but I kind of feel like once you're switching into a totally different thread, I feel like that opens me up to different kinds of storytelling. And I think that's like a similar thing to Magnolia, where like certain segments are really sad and certain segments are kind of upbeat and funny, and then like it all kind of falls into this absurd conclusion or middle part with the frogs falling out of the sky. But like ultimately that's what connect the situation is what connects everybody, less than like everybody's life being the same. And I think that's ultimately what it is it's just like once you're switching to just a totally different point of view instead of just sticking with the same characters, I was just open to that, is what I would say.
I think that's fair. I think most people agree with you on this, so I would still recommend people go see the film. I think just for me, it wasn't my screenplay. But you know what? Everyone has those films where it's not their films, and that's completely okay. Plenty of people hate my favorite films, so shout out Cats. I think with that, I'm kind of out of things to talk about with Weapons. Do you have anything left on your docket that you really want to get into?
The only thing that I'd want to say is something else that Zach Cregger said, which is that I think that he said that each character represents a different aspect of the grief he was going through, which I haven't quite. I just saw your face. I haven't quite parsed through that myself as far as like what I think each person represents. I have ideas for some of them, but I think that also plays into the way the tone shifts. Is just what I wanted to say.
Sure.
Last.
I will say Cregger going off about how this film is about him processing death, and that's all very serious, and my heart breaks for him. His friend died, and I think he did mean it. I also like his interview where he was like, it didn't work, like I'm still sad, like it really didn't accomplish its goal at all. It feels very to me James Gunn talking about how Superman's like all about being an immigrant, where it's like, sure buddy, yeah, no, it's all there. I agree, I don't see it, but I'm sure it's there for you. Yeah, I don't know if I fully am getting that reading or think it's really big in this, but valid to everyone. Shout out Zach. Um, with that, I think that's gonna do it for our Weapons review. If you want to watch Weapons in theaters right now, would recommend you go see it in the theater with a packed house. I think that's the best viewing experience you can possibly have for it. So definitely go check it out. With that, let's go to our question of the week. Michael, we have a few months left of 2025. We have the fall festival season right around the corner. It feels like we're really getting to like, wow, we're really about to start award season. I want to know, what films are you most excited for the rest of 2025, for these last few months?
God, time is flying. That's crazy. I would say I have a few, but I would say my top three would be Bradley Cooper's "Is This Thing On?" Gotta stay on brand. You know, we'll see how it actually turns out. I know that a lot of people already have their guns out for it because it's about a stand-up comedian or a new stand-up comedian going through a divorce, and kind of using that to deal with it. So it's definitely kind of a more male centric version of like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but with a modern setting, which I feel like is already bugging people. But I
He's
think
2 for 2 so far, right? Like,
I would say so. Most
I
people
would say
wouldn't.
it.
You like? I thought you didn't like Maestro.
No, I liked Maestro. I didn't
Oh,
love
okay.
it. I'm not like, I think A Star Is Born's like way up, but I like Maestro.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it'll be good, and I really like dramedies, so I'm excited for that. And then I would say One Battle After Another, I'm really looking forward to. I think the marketing campaign has been terrible, and it's going to make $6 at the box office, but all the same, I think the actual movie will be great, and I always love PTA. And then Die My Love with Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson, I think is going to be really sick. And even though I'm not sure if it's going to be better than If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You with Rose Byrne, which deals
Mm.
with a similar kind of postpartum depression subject. And when I watched that trailer, I thought, oh, maybe that what might end up being the better one. But I that's the one I'm looking forward to mostly because I love those two. Like that's a dream duo for me. And then I have a number of others, but I'll leave it to you.
Sure. I mean, obviously, I'm excited for Guadagnino's After the Hunt. Hilarious to me that some of these Oscar influencers, award season influencers, are out here trying to push that this is going to be a Best Picture contender, trying to push this as a Best Actress contender. Maybe it will be, but Guadagnino's never been that. I think it's so funny we're doing this year after year now because Challengers was popular and it's gets clicks to say that. Fascinating to me as a Guadagnino stan. Obviously, I'm excited for Avatar, but let's go to some more like low key options that maybe people don't know about. The Ballad of a Small Player, Edward Berger really cannot do wrong. I think he's probably one of the strongest working directors so far from what we've seen, at least. So I'm excited for his new film. I'm a big Aziz Ansari fan. Specifically, I think Master of None is like a fantastic show. So I'm excited for Good Fortune. I've been on a Kelly Reichardt train this year. I've watched all of her work and loved all of her work, so I'm excited for The Mastermind. And then finally, Michael, I'm shocked this is not on your list. Pinocchio Unstrung, the newest film in the Poohverse universe. Not that they're all great. We don't need to get in Bambi. But the effects for this one looks incredible. You have Mr. Freddy Krueger himself doing a voice role. I think this one's going to be good. This is like, I have genuinely high hopes that this is going to be an excellent film. Will that be disappointed? Probably. But I think this is the one. It has like the main director of the series. This is like the Russo brothers coming in. This is going to be the big one. I think this is the final one before the crossover film. This is going to be a big deal, guys. Pinocchio Unstrung comes out, I think, in October. Be there. You have to.
You're like
Yeah.
a high stakes gambler betting on a horse with broken legs.
Yeah, but it's
What
all,
do you
but
mean? It's just like I've only seen Blood and Honey too, and then of course the three of us, you, me, and
yeah,
Paul, went to go see Bambi the Reckoning, and like I want them to be funny. I don't understand why they're always like this is a drama. I'm like, girl, if
it's
you
cinema.
ever just decided to make these just fun, they would be. It's just I hope the Pooniverse Assemble or whatever the hell it's called doesn't try to convince me that there's some like it's kind of like honestly like it's sort of what we were talking about with weapons where like Blood and Honey just like stops to be like what if we actually had a 30-minute conversation about how this is about Christopher Robin's internal trauma, and I'm like bitch I don't care. I just like
Cinema.
I just like I don't trust that Pinocchio is gonna really kind of move the needle on that one. But I'm not even a big Pinocchio fan to begin with, to be honest with you. I
Me
didn't even like
neither.
Del Toro's one.
I'm not a giant Pinocchio stan either. Luckily, I don't think this is gonna, have much to do with the source material, but who knows? I haven't, we'll see. I'm not a big fan of Del Toro's. I'm a big fan of Robert Zemeckis's though. That one really hit it out of the park.
I watched that for 10 minutes and went, hell no. Like the
It's
second Tom Hanks opened his mouth and was like, oh, I'm Geppetto. I was like, no. We're done.
I think that's one of the movies that like killed the original version of the podcast because I watched that and I think like Paul and Lena watched that and we were like, we can't do this anymore. Like this can't be what we do. We can't just review everything. We have to have some standards.
I agree. I've really like my quality of life has gone up so much since I've decided to just like stop watching everything. Like if I think something looks okay, but I feel like there's potential for me to like it, I'll watch it. But if I'm just like bleh, I usually avoid it and I'm genuinely like less depressed because when I see a bad movie, I'm just annoyed for
Yeah.
like a day.
No,
Like
it's sad. It's a sad waste of time, a sad waste of your life. Just stop watching new releases. It will do you better unless you really think you're gonna like it. It's just not worth it. With that, Michael, I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Where can we find you on social media?
King of Burbank, TikTok, Instagram, Letterboxd, Twitter.
Not to be confused with anyone listening who is not seeing Michael right now. If anyone is listening and goes and looks up King of Burbank and finds this muscular guy hiking around Malibu, it's not him. That's not Michael. Different guy. Just to be very clear. Uh, now that you have an enemy, I guess.
He's my Wario, and now he's getting a mention on my podcasts appearances, which is excellent. I'm sure he'll be. I'm sure he'll be very pleased.
Well, just wait. Next
by
week,
that.
he's actually going to be on. We're going to talk about Under the Silver Lake.
You actually should have him on. I feel like that would be really funny.
We'll
but just like pretend he's me. Like see if people would believe that he's me.
Everyone comments there. Everyone on Spotify comments like, "Wow, Michael actually was doing good today. Like he was actually enjoyable to listen to."
No, really though, really, the King of Bourbon. If I ever decide to quit, well, I'll just pass the torch to him.
That's good. You can find me on Blue Sky and Letterboxd, just Carson Timar. If you enjoy listening to us talk about horror, stick around. Next month, we are starting our Road to Halloween series. We have a lot of old horror movies, new horror movies, plenty of spooky films to get into. And I'm excited to talk about those with a bunch of guests, including hopefully Michael for some of them. So with that, thank you so much for listening and watching. Goodbye.